Welcome back. Well, any peace deal, however temporary, is likely to include provision for an international force to be deployed along one or more of Gaza's borders. It's been suggested that an international presence be deployed on the Egyptian side of the border. This would aim to prevent Hamas from rearming itself through underground tunnels. There could also be a naval element dispatched to patrol the Gazan coastline. This would be similar to the arrangement made after the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. There have also been ideas put forward for a multinational force that would police the whole of the Gaza Strip. But the presence of foreign troops may not be accepted by all sides. Hamas has said on numerous occasions that it would consider any foreign force as an occupying power and treat them as the enemy. Israel may not be comfortable with a force which could be seen as monitoring its actions. Indeed, if the UN in particular were to deploy a force in Gaza, there would be strong arguments for the same to be done on the West Bank, something that could put Israeli expansion in that area on hold indefinitely. Still with us, our guests in Jerusalem, Nickolay Mladenov, in Damascus, Richard Burden, and in London, Abdel Bari Atwan. We were talking earlier on, Bari Atwan, if I could come to you first of all, about different peace proposals on the table. We've got the Mubarak-Sarkozy one. You mentioned the Turkish one, which was flying around actually before the Egyptian-Franco one. What is the difference between the two?
You know, David, let me just say something about this arms smuggling. When you listen to the Israelis talking about it, and also Tony Blair, the peace envoy, you think that Hamas is smuggling tanks, anti-aircraft guns, Tomahawk missiles, cruise missiles. Where are these weapons? You know what we are seeing now.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I hear your point, and I've heard the same point made across the week on this programme, but I really do want to get into the specifics. Let's talk about the peace plan. How does the Turkish proposal differ from the one that's on the table put forward by the presidents of France and Egypt?
Yeah, it is different because, you know, Hamas is very close to Turkey. Hamas trusts the Turkish Prime Minister. The Turkish Prime Minister started this peace initiative. He visited Syria, he visited Ramallah, he visited Egypt. So he developed this plan with consultation with Hamas. So that's why it is acceptable. If you want a peace plan which actually impose a ceasefire acceptable to all parties, we have to look at the Turkish one. You know, the Egyptian one actually doesn't coordinate with Hamas at all. It is going to impose the Israeli terms on Hamas and also on the Palestinian and Gaza Strip. That's completely unacceptable. Hamas is the one who is launching rockets. Hamas, the one who is actually in the receiving ends. So you have to deal with Hamas. You have to talk to Hamas. You have to involve Hamas. But if you know, the Egyptian French initiative ignoring Hamas completely, so that's why it's not acceptable.
That's a point I feel I should put to Mr. Mladenov in our Tel Aviv studio. Perhaps it would suit Israel to have a ceasefire which doesn't involve discussions with Hamas, simply with the Palestinian Authority, as the peace proposal put forward by Egypt and France does at the moment. Maybe you wouldn't like to see, if you support Israel, a greater involvement of Hamas in this.
I think we all want to see an end to the violence and a stopping of the shelling of Israel as well. Now, to do that, there needs to be an arrangement. And I think the value of the Egyptian proposal is that indeed Egypt has had a history of managing actually to deliver on a peace deal before a ceasefire. Secondly, it does take into account the very serious problem of the smuggling. And I know that the Egyptians and the Israelis and the Palestinians are discussing ideas of how this can be ensured very specifically, very concretely on the Egyptian-Gaza border. And thirdly, I think it is built around an emerging consensus in the Middle East that Hamas itself is not just a problem for Israel, it's also a problem for Egypt, it is also a problem for the Palestinian Authority. And lastly, it needs to address the longer-term issue, and that is how to reassert the authority of the PA in Gaza overall throughout the Palestinian territories, so that actually President Abbas and the Palestinian Authority can speak on behalf of all the Palestinians in the negotiations with Israel and the rest of the world. And this is a very vital and it might be actually a long-term issue that we all need to consider very carefully. That's quite separate from Israel. I don't think that Israel has a role to play in this last process, but it's very important indeed.
Richard Burden, I mentioned the multinational force or the possibility of it earlier on in the programme. There have been difficulties with putting these into sort of very volatile areas. I think about the southern part of Lebanon in the past, in Bosnia too. It's something that perhaps the international community might be reluctant to do, and the two parties in this case might be reluctant to accept. Is it workable?
It depends what an international force would be. You have had an international presence in that part of the world anyway. For instance, there have been European monitors and so on the Rafah crossing and elsewhere. But you see, this is where I think Bari Atwan has got a good point. It depends a bit what an international force is going to do. If it is intended, and solely intended, to try to find a way of legitimizing keeping the people of Gaza in some kind of box cut out from the outside world, then it's not going to be accepted by them and it's not going to work. If it's an international force that allows the protection of civilians, yes, in Israel, but also in Gaza as well, and it has the confidence of civilians in Gaza to provide them with protection, and guarantees normal life, access for trade in and out of Gaza, access for humanitarian supplies in and out of Gaza, then I think there may be something to talk about there. But, you know, we've got to be clear what an international force is all about. And this is where I think Nickolay needs to just think a bit about what he's saying. Because, you know, just over about 18 months ago now, after Hamas was democratically elected to the majority in the Palestinian parliament, in the way that Mahmoud Abbas was democratically elected as president of the Palestinian people, there was an agreement to form a national unity government involving Fatah, involving Hamas, and involving independents that offered the opportunity of bringing the Palestinian people together and having real negotiations with Israel that could have provided a way forward. Now, that was spurned by Israel, who carried on with the blockade, and sadly it was spurned by the international community.
So it is, and I'm sure we would all admit to this, Richard Burden, it is the longer-term problems that are going to be the most difficult in this situation, notwithstanding the fact that Gaza is under bombardment. So, Bari Atwan, January the 20th, a new president. Would you say the Palestinians are excited at the prospect of Obama at the White House, or given what little he's had to say about the crisis in Gaza, are they concerned about his arrival?
Well, actually, the Palestinians were extremely happy to see President Obama elected in the last American presidential election. But actually, many Palestinians are hugely disappointed because Obama kept silent and he did not condemn the Israeli atrocities in Gaza the way he did when the atrocities took place in Mumbai. So they cannot understand his position that they cannot be two presidents in the White House. Why he actually outspoken when it comes to India, and he's completely silent when it comes to the Palestinian and victimized by the Israelis. So I think, yes, the euphoria which spread in the Arab world and the Muslim world that Obama will make changes in the American foreign policy start to erode quickly. And I hope his silence is disapproval of the American policies in supporting Israel to continue this carnage. But I would like to refer to other points.
I've got to give Nickolay Mladenov a chance to put the Friends of Israel perspective on this. Is there any expectation that Barack Obama will change American policy, i.e. not continue without any questioning to support Israel, that he may actually become a better friend to the Palestinian people than he is to Israel? Are there any concerns in Israel about that?
I think this question it's too early to answer that question, and I understand the frustration of.
Well, you can tell me whether there are concerns. You can't tell me what the reality will be.
Well, I don't think any of us knows, because he's been quite wise in not intervening before he is formally the president of the United States. I think too many people are speaking right now, and we should actually wait for him to come into the White House to take office. But let me just very briefly respond to the point of any international force in Gaza. I think it would be an excellent idea, and I think everyone should support the idea of having a credible monitoring force that can verify everything that happens in Gaza, that can verify disarmament, or that can verify that there is no smuggling, or that there are no rockets fired on Israel. But I think it is a little bit of wishful thinking right now, because this idea has been flatly rejected by Hamas. It has not been rejected by Israel, but it has been flatly rejected by Hamas. And if we are to put in some sort of a token force just to run around the border, I don't think that will be very effective for either of the sides. So as part of a longer-term agreement, I think we should press ahead with this idea, but be very careful and make sure that all the sides come around to it. And this is in the interest of the Palestinian Authority, and Palestinian Authority should be our biggest partner in this in Gaza.
I can see both our other guests wanting to say something, but we have pretty much come to the end. Two politicians and one newspaper man. We could talk forever, but we have to stop now. I'd like to thank you in Jerusalem, Nickolay Mladenov, in Damascus, Richard Burden, and in London, Abdel Bari Atwan. Thank you for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. From me, David Foster, and from the rest of the team. Bye-bye for now.